start lesson 2, finally. This section, this lesson, I guess, covers chapters 3 through 7 of 1 Samuel. So that's quite a bit of area to cover. Of course, all of these are that way. So we'll kind of go through this as we have gone through it. Take our time and get to where we get to. All right. As we're getting this pulled up here. Some people take superstitions and good luck charms very seriously. Okay, rely on them, right, to help them avoid trouble, to bring them good fortune. I'm sure you all can think of or know of some superstitions, or maybe not superstitions, just little stitions or whatever it is. Some things that you do that kind of think. That you know of, like people, like for example, rally caps in baseball, right? If it's close, rally caps are down, their team is down, and they need some runs or whatever, right? They'll put the hats on crazy, and the whole team will do it, right, and do certain things to bring them good luck, right? We all probably have little superstitions, maybe, or even like just some habits that we do a lot that kind of just make things work through the chaos, right? To make sure that we're doing, just kind of keep, I want to say good luck, good fortune, that kind of stuff kind of going forward. What are some superstitions maybe that you have observed in people, or some things that, good luck things that people try to do to get good fortune? Can you think of any?
Chain letters and silly stuff on Facebook.
Okay, yeah, sure, right? You see those all the time, popping up on Facebook. Do this for good luck and good fortune.
My grandma would go a little crazy if a black cat went in front of the car. She would start like Xing out her.
Sure, yeah, I've seen people do that.
Yeah. And she'd give it
Not
down
to,
the road.
yeah, not to put Haley's mom on blast, but Sheila will do that now. Today, we've been in the car with her once. She does the same thing. I've seen that happen too. So those are things, right? Stuff people do. Do people oftentimes treat God like a good luck charm? Yeah, I would say absolutely, right? God teaches Israel. As we go through these chapters, we will see him teaching Israel that he was not going to serve as their good luck charm as they begin to battle the Philistines here. God lets Israel lose their battle so that they might learn the correct way to win. And what they really needed, right, was a change of heart and a change of a personal, worshipful relationship with him, right? Not just treating him as a token of something that he can allow good fortune to take place. And if you think about the way that the Israelites treated God, it was very similar to the ways in which the other heathenites, right, were treating their gods, right? They would do all these rituals and have all these things so that hopefully the rain would come, or that hopefully the women would get pregnant, or that hopefully the crops would grow, right, or whatever the case may be. They were falling into the same patterns and doing the same things. Unlike these other false gods, though, God allowed these, these trials and problems to happen to teach them the correct way of worshiping and serving him. So he's teaching them how to win by allowing them to lose. And that's kind of what we're going to see here through a large portion of these chapters that we look at, that there are two battles going on for Israel's heart. As you can see, that's kind of the title here. of what this lesson is about. So let's go to chapter 3 of 1 Samuel, and we're just going to read the first 4 verses to start off with, and we'll kind of work through this piecewise as we begin to get a little more focused here on Samuel and some of the stuff that he is doing. And it's a pretty famous story here in chapter 3 that we know very well, and we're kind of looking at this. So let's read the first 4 verses here of Samuel chapter 3, and let's get started. And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There is no open vision. And it came to pass at that time, when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see. And ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, and that the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. So, at Shiloh, all right, this is where this is at. Samuel, young boy here, probably pre-teenage age, probably anywhere from, probably anywhere from 7 to 9 or 10 years old, right? Maybe a little older, is there, and he's assisting the high priest Eli in the temple by performing small tasks, right, doing little jobs around, and learning the priestly rituals that Eli was teaching him, right? He was being involved in these things and using his talents and the ability to him to, his youthfulness to assist Eli in those things. Now, as we saw, that verse 1, the word of the Lord here, right, is a very precious thing, right? It says that specifically, the word of the Lord was precious in those days because there was no open vision. Now, what does it mean when it says there is no open vision, right? So what that phrase is in there for is that even Samuel himself, chosen of God, life directed very much by God, he had not received a direct message from the Lord, right? There has been no direct messaging coming from the Lord. That's why this is what event that is about to unfold is very important. So nobody's receiving these direct messages from God. All the way down, if you'll just jump down to verse 7, it says that now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. So Samuel, albeit life young, being directed by the Lord, we don't really see Samuel having that relationship, right, with the Lord yet. It's not happening. Has not happened for him. So when you jump back up to verse 4, and we see now that he's asleep at night, the lights are out, and he hears his name being called, right? He hears this voice calling out his name, Samuel, right? The name. We see why he reacted in the way in which he reacts. So verse 4, the Lord called Samuel, and he answered and said, Here I am. And he gets up, right, and he runs into verse 5 and runs unto Eli and says, Here I am, for thou callest me. And he said, I didn't call you, I called not. Lie down again, and he went and laid down. So Samuel is probably multiple times now has heard Eli hollering for him to come help him do something. He's asleep. Eli, at least know his eyes aren't very good at all. So he hears this voice and just expects or thinks that Eli's needing some help with something. So he gets up and runs in there to his room and asks him, Hey, what do you need? How can I help you? And Eli says to him, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. So he goes and asks him what he wanted, and then he tells him to go back. Verse 6, and the Lord called yet again Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for thou didst call me. And he answered again, I called not, my son, lie down again. Then we get to verse 7, right? Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, neither was the Lord revealed unto him. Verse 8, the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he rose and went to Eli, and he said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Right? So 3 times now this happens. Samuel's not sure what's going on, so he goes into Eli the third time. And Eli realizes what's taking place here, right? Eli understands what's taking place here and realizes that the Lord was calling unto the child Samuel. Verse number 9. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Samuel, go and lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and laid down in his place. Now, there's a bit of a thing we can kind of look into here, that the first time that Samuel comes into Eli and asks him what he wants, Eli probably chalked it up to him being young and just thinking that he's hearing stuff in the night. Right? But after the second time it happened, you would think that Eli would begin to kind of understand maybe what's happening here. But it shows us that we know the history of Eli here, right? Has Eli been a real good high priest? He's not, right? He's not really done things very well at all. And it's taking him multiple times, up to a third time now, to understand what is exact. Eli, if he was in tune with the Lord in his relationship the way that it should have been, Eli should have probably understood after the first time that there's nobody else around. We know Samuel's not making stuff up. Samuel's a good little boy. He's working hard and doing all these things. That something is happening here. But it takes even Eli multiple times to understand what the Lord is doing here, because his relationship is falling by the wayside pretty severely. Right? He's not being a great example here for Samuel. But we see now, after the third time, Eli understanding and explaining to Samuel to go and listen and to call out. And if he hears his name again, he's supposed to say, verse 9, we see, if you hear he called you, thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and laid down in his place. Now, Eli's counsel here that he gives Samuel reveals now that he's understanding that he was to be God's servant, right? Eli understood that he was to be God's servant. He gives Samuel this advice, which was good advice, but the actions proved that he was serving himself and his sons rather than God. So Eli knows what he's supposed to be doing. He's just simply not doing it. But he's given good counsel here towards Samuel. Now, let's get into the mind frame of Samuel here for a second, because I've got an 8-year-old at the house, but I can imagine that if this was going on, and the third time now that Samuel goes and lays back down, I can just imagine I'm just kind of putting Pippa in this situation. Like, there would be no sleep, right? She would be laying in bed, and I'm sure Samuel was the exact same way, right? Eyes wide awake, any time that a mouse moved or anything, you can imagine what he's like right here, right? Anxiously awaiting for what takes place. And just hoping that this happens again. So we get now to verse number 10. Before we do that, though, if you got your book, there's probably a question there, I'm sure. It says, How well had Eli followed his counsel to listen to the Lord? How well had Eli been listening to the Lord? Not very well at all, right? He hadn't followed it very well at all. Just a second, sorry. He had pretty much ignored the law of God. There was a specific message, right, that we did several weeks ago now. The specific message from the Lord that Eli ignored. And we know that Eli was partaking in the fat from the sacrifices that belonged to the Lord. And he had continued to do the same thing, kind of like his sons had done. And that was the specific thing that he was ignoring from God. Which shows, again, why I think it takes 3 times for him to kind of understand what's going on. It should have been the first time and kind of see the state of the matter of the way things are. Now, back to Samuel. Verse 10, The Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. Okay, now we get into the mind frame of what Samuel is like here. What does Samuel do when his name is called again? And how does he answer? What?
The servant has.
All right. Go back up to verse number 8. To the letter, right? He responded down to the punctuation, the way in which Eli told him to respond. Now, you all have raised young'uns. All right? How many times when you've given instructions to your young children have they followed it to the exact letter? Rarely, right? They may do some of it, right? But it's kind of a rare. Sometimes it takes a couple times, right? Especially at a young age. But we see the kind of the personality of what Samuel is here, right? Because he was told once from Eli, and he did exactly to the letter what he was told to do. So we're seeing very early glimpses here of the heart and mindset of what this young boy Samuel is like. He did exactly as he was told to do. Except for one thing. Then Eli said unto Samuel, Go lie down, and it shall be, if he called thee, thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. And then we get to Samuel's response, and he says, Speak. Look at the end of verse 10. Speak. What word does he leave out? He does not use the word Lord, right? He says, Speak, for thy servant heareth. Now, we see the state of Samuel, and we're seeing him being obedient. And he has a very genuine spirit, and has humility here, and him leaving out the word Lord in response, still showing submission to God. Okay? The Lord announces to Samuel then, in response to this, that he was about to do something that are going to make people's ears tingle. Okay, verse 11, And the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of every one that heareth it shall tingle. Okay. Now, so the implications here that the Lord is telling this young boy, the implications is that this report that he was about to give would cause people to be, ears tingling means, right, it was going to cause them to be pricked at their conscience, right? They're going to prick at their conscience here, and they're going to consider their own ways in relationship with God, okay? I think this is an interesting way in which the Lord tells this to Samuel, right? Because ears tingling, and when I think of ears tingling, as I was kind of going through this, when I was thinking of ears tingling and why he used this, I automatically thought of like when your ears are ringing, right? Now, when your ears are ringing, who knows that your ears are ringing? Just you, right? But you are very well aware that you have a ringing going on in your ears, right? And it makes you think inside of what, like push your ear or whatever case may be. Nobody else realizes the effect of what ears tingling has or ears ringing has, but we all know what that means when we mention ears ringing, right? When I say your ears ringing, you know what that effect has, right? So the Lord uses this language, I think, specifically to kind of show how this report that he's going to give is going to have implications internally on each individual person that hears this. They're going to be faced anew with the fact that God is a personal being who must be worshipped respectfully and served sincerely. In the house of Eli was to be the example to the rest of Israel. So God reveals to Samuel that his judgment against Eli's house was about to take place. Let's go to verse 12. In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house, and when I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice, nor offering forever. So God revealing to Samuel here, this young boy, the judgment that's going to take place, and that the punishment that God's going to bring to Eli's and to his son, that punishment is going to be permanent, because they broke his law, and because of them breaking the law, the penalty for them was death. And once God took the lives of these people, there would be no hope for them for all of eternity. Right? That's what he's saying here. Therefore, verse 14, I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice, nor offering forever. All right, so there was very great severity that God was treating the atrocities that Eli's house had done against him. Okay, so again, think about Samuel here, young kid, right? Had his first divine experience with the Lord. The Lord showed up and telling him these things. We said a couple weeks ago, like Samuel was there. He saw some of this stuff going on. Right? He knew what was happening. Still pretty young though, and now he's hearing this judgment that's going to be laid out before Eli and his family, and he's having to hear all of these things. Okay, so now verse 15. So he reveals it to Samuel, and then we're going to see the revelation here to Eli, starting in verse 15. And Samuel lay until morning, and opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. So we see here that Samuel was laying. We don't see him sleeping, right? I don't think do you think Samuel slept the rest of the night? I don't. I wouldn't have. You can imagine Samuel didn't. You can imagine what's going through this poor little boy's head right now. So he's laying there until the morning, waiting to, he probably gets up at a certain time, opens the doors to the house of the Lord like he always has. So he gets up and starts doing the work. And we see here he is fearing to tell Eli what he was told of the Lord. Verse 16, Then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, Here am I. And he said, What is the thing that the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me, all of the things that he said unto thee. And Samuel told him every whit, and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seemeth him good. So, obviously Samuel is probably torn, doesn't want to tell Eli what's getting ready to happen. Eli insists, though, to tell him the entirety of the story, even threatens Samuel with a curse if he doesn't reveal the entire message. And Samuel, probably fearfully, but obediently, tells him everything that is God told him the previous night. We see Eli's response there in verse number 18, which is kind of a surprising response, I think, because it's a pretty dreadful message, right? This divine judgment that's being laid out to Eli through Samuel the boy. And he says, it is verse 18, right? It is the Lord, let him do what seemeth him good. And with that brief sentence, right, Eli kind of just accepts the fate that is going to take place, resigns himself to the final verdict here that God has laid out for his sins against him. Verse 19, And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. So from that day forward, right, from the moment in which he came and told Samuel the judgment, we see that I've lost my place. That God was with him, and Samuel did not let any of his words fall to the ground, meaning that everything Samuel foretold came to pass. All of Israel, right, from Dan all the way to Beersheba, would soon understand that God was on the move once again in Israel, and that God had chosen Samuel to be his prophet and his priest in Shiloh. Go ahead, Chad, bring that map up. It should be on the next slide. All right, so We see here all the way, kind of the encompassing of all of this area of Israel at the time. You see all the different places that are at, all the way down here from Beersheba, which is down here plumb in the south, all the way up to the very north up there. That's probably hard for you all to see, but up to the very north of that is Dan. That's the area that is encompassed there. Shiloh kind of sits pretty much right there in the middle. And God is going to, through Samuel, this entire nation now is going to understand that God is once again no longer quote-unquote silent. He's on the move once again. God also rekindled the bigger plan here through Samuel as providing a Messiah and a Savior for Israel. Now, Samuel, of course, we know eventually anoints David, God's choice to be king of Israel. Jesus then came to earth as Shiloh, the descendant of Judah and David, who died for the sins of the world. So that's kind of the revelation that begins now post some quiet time, some silence from the Lord. And Samuel is now kind of the restarting point of this messianic prophecy that shows up and that happens at the culmination with Jesus Christ. Okay, so that's what's revealed in chapter 3, right? So it's a lot of stuff there in those 19 verses that kind of take place, or 21 verses that kind of take place. And at the head of this, right, the spearhead of all this is this young kid, Samuel, who kind of begins this process, right? And I always go back, right? I'm going to do this a lot because I think it's so important for us to remember this and kind of bring this up a ton. None of this happens without Hannah, right? None of it happens without Hannah being so dedicated to her prayerful life. It doesn't, right? Well, if Hannah would have said no to this, right? She would have been mad and bitter, which had every right in the world to be. If she didn't bring the baby back, if she didn't pray the way that she prayed, right? If she wasn't so prayerful, none of these things that were laid out from here, it doesn't. Hannah single-handedly changed the course of human history. She did, because of the way that she reacted in very difficult times. And we see evidence, we can kind of see the fingerprints of that all the way through. Okay? Go ahead, Chad. All right, let's get into chapter 4 a little bit. All right, now, so, judgment's coming. Israel's been wicked for a long time. God is going to judge the people here for their wickedness because of their gross sin. And by gross, I mean twofold: magnitude and despicableness of it, right? Word works for both of those things. Allow this perennial enemy to kind of show up and to attack Israel, and we see the reports of that here in chapter 4. So let's jump into the first 3 verses here of this. And the word of Samuel, specific timeline, if we wanted to dig in to some of the more secular histories, we could probably get a timeline of the time in which the Philistines attacked and not, but I didn't really do that. But there has been some time that has passed here. We know that because we see in chapter 3, it kind of talks about the word of the Lord continuing to be with Samuel. So some time has passed, and we see the Philistines, perennial enemy of the Israelites, showed up here, and they began to get ready to launch an attack here on Israel. Verse 2, and the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel. And when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. Verse 3, and when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, that when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies. So the people sent to Shiloh, they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubim. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. All right, so the soldiers here in verse 1 of Israel take up a position in Ebenezer, while the Philistines are kind of digging their heels in there in Aphek. And During the ensuing battle that takes place, Israel suffers a pretty stunning defeat. Thousands of men are killed here, 4,000 to be specific. Foot soldiers are lost there. The loss of life that took place on that one battle should have caused the remaining people to realize the wickedness, the spiritual indifference that had going on. That was what was the cause for the humiliating defeat. They should have realized that. And they actually correctly asked in verse 3, right? And when the elders were coming to the camp, where they said, "Wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines?" Right? So they asked the correct questions. The Lord did cause the defeat. They asked that correctly. But instead of repenting, so they realized what had happened, but instead of repenting of the very obvious sinfulness that had caused this defeat, in seeking the Lord for guidance, they do something totally different, right? What do they decide to do in verse 4? Verse 3 and 4. They want to go back to Shiloh and get the what? The Ark of the Covenant, right? Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant up. That thing's got to help us win the battles. God resides there. It's a powerful thing. It's got stuff in it, whatever. Great. People touch it and die. Let's bring it up here to help us beat the Philistines. That's pretty much what they did. Right? They went and got a good luck charm, thinking it would help them. It's exactly what took place here, hoping it would save them from the Philistines. Now, the Philistines. Originally, the Philistines were sea people who were migrated from the Aegean Islands to the Mediterranean coast. They eventually found their way to the southern coast of Israel in the migrations that took place around 2000 BC to 1200 BC. Now, this is just an interesting thing. Do anybody know today what people can tie their roots back to the Philistines? Can't even. Anybody know? No. Good guess, though. The Philistines can be traced into the Palestinians. Philistines can be traced into the Palestinians. Okay? You can. An interesting fact for us. Constantly fighting at in the Gaza Strip, right? Jack, can you go back to that slide with the map? And where is that Gaza Strip located on this map? Can we tell? Anywhere know where it's at? So we got the Dead Sea here, Valley of Salt. We got the Sea of Galilee up there. We got the Jordan River that runs kind of in the middle. Where's the Gaza Strip at? Anybody know? Well, right here it says Gaza. And right above Gaza, we see, and you all can't see it, can you? But right above Gaza, it says Philistia, or Philistines, right? So this is kind of the area in here that to this day, the Israelites, well, the Jews, are fighting and taking hold of that area because, and let's get to, this is the whole thing here, right? We have all this conflict going on in Samuel. We have all the conflict of King David, we know, captures a huge portion of the Israelites, right? We know that Joshua, we just got done with it, they were supposed to go in and capture all of Canaan, right, and take that land for their own because God had promised it to them. Did any of these people fully capture the entire area? No. Were they told to? Yes. And they did not. Correct? So we are continuing to see today in 2026 the same fight that was happening in 2000 BC, several thousand years before, simply because, why is there still so much conflict in the Middle East today?
Because they never kicked them out.
Because they didn't do it right the first time. Right? They didn't do what God told them to do the first time. So now there's constant conflict. And will there be continuing conflict there forever until Christ finally comes back and sets up his kingdom? Absolutely. There's never going to be peace in the Middle East. Right? There's always going to be fights there because you've got the Israelites, original Israelites, who did not do what they were supposed to do to start with. And then there's you can trace the history of where the Israelites eventually get moved into. It's a whole different angle we don't want to get into, but that's why there's still conflict there. Okay? All stemming from the original stuff that we've been studying here in Joshua and now into Samuel. Okay? So, in this case, Philistines from Philistia show up. They kick the Israelites' butt, essentially. They didn't think, they go and try to get the Ark of the Covenant here in verse 3, hoping that it's going to help them in some form or fashion, be able to help them win more battles that are coming. Now, let's go to Joshua chapter 1, because it wasn't that long ago we were in Joshua. Let's just go over there for a second. Chapter 7. Sorry, chapter 1, verse 7. Sorry. O be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses, my servant, commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. The book of the law shall not depart of thy mouth. Thou shalt meditate on it there day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and thou shalt have good success. Have I not commanded thee, be strong and of good courage? Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. What was God's promise concerning his presence to the people of Israel? That he would be with them wherever they went. What did God promise concerning his blessings? That he would bless Israel for doing what? Trusting him and keeping the law, right? Keeping the laws and trusting in him, living and knowing his law and living out his law. So, according to the instructions to Joshua, who's to blame for Israel's failure in battle? Israel. Israel here is to blame, right? So the sight here of the ark lifted the Israelites' spirits. Verse 4. Back in 1 Samuel, sorry. So the people sent to Shiloh that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubim, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant. And verse 5, when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, what did the Israelites do in verse 5? They shouted, so that the earth rang again. So the Ark of the Covenant was brought into the camp of the Israelites after this 4,000 man defeat. Eli's two wicked sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who have already been told that they're going to die, show up with the Ark of the Covenant on the battleground. And with a huge cheer that rang out, so that verse 5 says that the earth rang again. What are the people failing to realize here? We'll finish this up. What are the people failing to recognize and realize as the Hophni and Phinehas are bringing the Ark of the Covenant in? They're putting the trust one in an object. And also the Phinehas and Hophni. Chapter 2, what were the people doing with Phinehas and Hophni? Well, yeah, and did they want to bring the sacrifices to the temple? They didn't. Why? Because what was Hophni and Phinehas doing to they were stealing it, right? And they knew they were stealing it, and they didn't want anything to do with it, and they didn't want to go give sacrifices because they had those two jokers, right? And now these two boys are showing up with the Ark of the Covenant, and we see all these Israelites doing what? Well, it's party time, right? We're going to win this thing. They're cheering. They're happy. It gives them this great thing. They're failing to recognize that Hophni and Phinehas were the corrupt lawbreakers and were in no position to win God's favor. Israel is trying to force God to help them to win. If they lost the battle, they would lose the Ark of the Covenant, the piece of tabernacle furniture over which God's presence dwelt. Winning, on the other hand, would boost God's reputation as dominant over the gods of the Philistines. The people were convinced they had a foolproof plan to wield God's power. They shouted so loudly that the earth shook. Next week in verse 6, we'll pick up and see what happens after this. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this lesson that we have, for this time that we look into your word. in the continual faithfulness of Samuel that we'll see, the reactions, Lord, that take place as well. And we see the state of affairs there in the hearts of the people of Israel. It helps us, Lord. We pray that it helps us to understand what value you put in a life that lived in service to you. I pray for Pastor Rob as he comes here in the next little bit too. So you have our business meeting today as well, Lord, which is direct all things. This morning, in our prayer. Amen.